China is hosting celebrations in the port city of Qingdao for the 70th founding anniversary of the PLA Navy, including an international fleet review on April the 23rd. China's latest nuclear submarines, destroyers and fighter jets made their debut. So, is it a milestone in China's steady rise as a major naval power? And how do we understand China's naval modernization and respond to the doubts over whether Beijing is flexing its military muscle? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Zhu Chenghu, professor from the National Defense University of PLA, Professor Huang Jing, Dean of the Institute for International and Regional Studies at Beijing Language and Culture University, and Pavel Falkenhauer, a Russian defense analyst from Moscow. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pan Deng. Gentlemen, I'd like to start with President Xi Jinping's remarks on Tuesday morning when he was meeting with delegates of foreign navies attending the International Fleet Review. He said China pursues a national defense policy that is defensive in nature and champions new thinking on common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security. Let's talk about this new thinking. Professor Huang, what's new here and as to what?
I think what is new first and foremost is that China is a global power. As the first #1 trading power on earth, the new thinking, of course, have to protect China's interests. As China becomes bigger and bigger, and the space of to be defended also expanded first. And second is that as China global power, there is some interactions between China and other countries, including military interactions. Of course, new thinking also include a kind of military-to-military exchanges and doing this, like this time. A lot of foreign warships also come here to celebrate the 70 years. Last but not least, of course, is that since China's military capability increased dramatically, and so that's China's new thinking also includes China's defense space and the capability also increased, and also defense strategy also adjusted as such.
Professor Zhu, what's the old thinking and why it is the right time to adopt a new thinking?
Comparatively speaking, by old thinking, I believe that is the collective security, which is advocated by the United States and other allies of the United States. I believe that the collective security is based on the insecurity of other countries which are not members of the allies. So this is new. Secondly, I think this is new not only in the thinking but also in the practice. Since China advocates common security, it needs the cooperation of the members of the world community. This is very important. Therefore, we could have been able to see in this parade 13 countries and 18 warships have been invited to participate. This is one. Another one, I think, in security, I think we have to seek sustainable security. This is very important. Without sustainable security, I don't think we will have the sustainable development. So all these four factors in the new thinking can promote with each other, and they function upon with each other.
And talking about that sustainable maritime security, President Xi Jinping also called upon countries to provide this public goods for maritime security. Do you think, Professor, this is somehow to address the concern of that sustainable security?
Because one of the major idea or strategy of President Xi Jinping is that we are going to build a kind of international community of shared destiny, the Renmin Gongtongti. In that kind, security is not something you can achieve unilaterally. You have to do it through multilateral cooperation. That's why if you want a sustainable security, that means you have to work with others, and either through cooperation or like partnership. Of course, President Xi Jinping said China never wanted any allies, but that does not mean that China will do it alone. We have to do it with others, because like I said, China has been deeply integrated into international system, and so that's why if China is not secure, nobody is secure. Otherwise, but on the other way, if other security also being undermined, China also feels threatened. So therefore, sustainability means that China is going to work with others on security issues, on goodwills, and also on a very kind of capability that can put China into an important position.
So earlier, Professor Zhu just mentioned that collective security was somehow based on the common sense of insecurity. So do you think this kind of insecurity is still common on the high seas at this moment?
Yes, we have three sources of threat. Number one, of course, is some hostile forces, we have countries put sanctions on others and have the military power all over the world. Also, a second source from terrorism, like in the Aden Gulf. And the last but not the least is from some unpredictable forces, including the non-traditional natural forces. So security means that we have to work together. Collective security means that we work together and following the same rule of game and so on and so forth. And I believe collective security is one of the major contributions of China to the world. This is have a quite substantial difference from so-called alliance system. Alliance system, number one, it's not a really equal relationship. It has the leader of alliance and the followers. But this kind of collective security first is based on equal relationship, that everybody on the equal footing and mutual beneficiary.
So earlier we were talking about maritime community of a shared future, Professor Zhu. So it's a grand design indeed, but let's take one specific region, the South China Sea. How can this grand design be entailed in that hot-button region?
First of all, South China Sea is a very important sea lane of communication. It produces a huge impact on the economic development of countries on its periphery or around its rim. Secondly, there are disputes here, and I don't think the disputes could be addressed by resorting to military means. So we have to work together on the basis of cooperation and on an equal basis. And thirdly, there are rich resources in this region. I think the countries concerned should jointly explore the resources in this region so as to serve the development of the countries on the rim of China's South China Sea.
For more insights into this, let's talk to Mr. Pavel Falkenhauer in Moscow. Mr. Falkenhauer, do you think it's the right time to talk about new thinking in maritime security and maritime affairs as to the outthinking of collective security?
Well, the Chinese role of the Chinese military is, of course, changing. I believe that the major change began when the Somali pirates threatened to undermine the very vital for the Chinese economy naval link through the Suez Channel. And China went out there, sent out its ships together with other nations to stop that from happening. And it turned out that China needed a really new navy with a totally different outreach. And actually, it also needed to cooperate with many other nations, Western and Eastern, to achieve a common goal. So this is a kind of example of what really the Chinese is right now, political leadership and military leadership is talking about. It's extended protection of force to keep sea lanes open, to keep trade flowing, which is essential for China and essential for other nations. So this is a kind of win-win situations for all, and this is a cooperative action, cooperative effort to keep that happening and keep security. I mean, the security is not an abstract phenomena. It's always concrete. There's a threat to security, and this threat should be met. There's possibility of in the Gulf that there could be instability with the sanctions against Iran, and that could affect also China and other nations that rely on oil coming from the Gulf. There are threats on sea, threats on land and in the air, but also on sea. And China needs a different outlook, a different navy for a different job. And that's, of course, what it's all about, I believe.
We know Russia has sent naval vessels to attend the International Fleet Review near Qingdao. So, talking about regional security, especially in Northeast Asia, do you think the two countries have some consensus or some overlapping interests in this particular issue?
Well, actually, Russia sent even 3 different battle groups. One was coming directly from Vladivostok with Pacific Fleet, led by the flagship cruiser Varag. Another, also Pacific Task Force, first visited Vietnam, then came to Qingdao. And a third one, a new frigate with support vessels, actually sailed in February from the Russian north around Europe and Asia to reach Qingdao in time right now. And so Russia was using this occasion not just as a parade of kind of friendship and everything, but also to test the logistical capabilities of moving forces from one far-off theater to another, to concentrate them, say, in the Pacific for possible cooperative action together with China. So the Russian Navy is clearly taking this very importantly and using this as a real occasion to send the signal that Russia can concentrate forces in the summer and actually in the winter time too in the Pacific region and cooperate with China at the scene. Of course, China was also sending during the recent years its ships to not only to the Gulf and to the Horn of Africa, but also Mediterranean, Russian Black Sea ports. So China is reaching out, Russia is reaching out, and they are testing the logistics of doing that, which is very important in maritime strategy. The logistics come first.
Well, Mr. Felgenhau, we'll be getting back to you. Now, gentlemen, let's take a closer look at the changes of the Chinese Navy. Let's start with the latest model of China's strategic nuclear submarine, the Long March 10. It's reported as bearing with largest tonnage built by China. How important is this, Professor?
I think first that shows that China's capability of build nuclear submarine has been increased tremendously. China is capable of doing this, number one. Number two, that means China's defense, national defense, has also upgraded greatly, because we know that nuclear submarine is very important for a second strike capability, which means that China will always have the power, capability to retaliate whoever attacks China in a nuclear attack. Last but not least, of course, China can sustain a nuclear submarine in a long-term operation in the high seas, which of course is a very good, is a very solid guarantee for China's national security.
And Professor Zhu, what about the latest destroyer, which is the largest in the Chinese Navy, the O55 destroyer? Tell us the significance of this new model. Do you think this large destroyer is somehow related to the upcoming debut, if will be very soon, China's very first homemade aircraft carrier?
You know, this is the largest and the most sophisticated destroyer in the world. I think the tonnage or displacement and as well as the fire units are much greater than that of the United States aged destroyer. This is one. Secondly, I think with the service of the aircraft carriers, you will have to have qualified surface ships and submarines to protect the aircraft carrier, because the aircraft carrier is very, very expensive and they need the protection because the aircraft carrier itself does not have enough capability to protect itself on the sea. So it needs the protection of those sort of sophisticated surface ships. So this destroyer will be one of the qualified protectors of the aircraft carriers in case the aircraft carrier is group is sent to the high sea to perform missions. And thirdly, I believe that it shows that China is capable of making or manufacturing any sort of sophisticated warships because this is the most sophisticated one at present.
So we've talked about advanced and sophisticated models, and many observers are saying that there's a clear change of the strategy of the Chinese Navy from offshore to blue water. That may sound a little bit abstract for common viewers. Professor Huang, tell us, what does that entail exactly? Do you think that the age of Alfred Mahan's sea power theory is outdated, or it's still in place?
It's still in place in the sense that the blue water navy means, first and foremost, you can sustain a long-term operation in the high seas far away from your home, and that's a great demand. Number one. Number two is that when you have a fleet going out in the high seas, you have to maintain a kind of communication, like instant communication, so that the fleet can lawfully operate with the guidance or with order from the headquarters. Last but not the least, the operation means you have to have a very strong self-defense capability, because when you're out there in the blue water in the high seas, your target for attack, you have to be able to defend yourself. So this is kind of combination of a lot of high-tech stuff, not only electronic engine, firing power, radar system, communication system, and so on and so forth. But also, it's a training everything. So I think China has made really a substantial progress that is recognized by the entire world, that Chinese Navy is no longer like a home water navy, but really now it's a navy that can operate it in a global level, a global space.
What's your take on this change of strategy, Professor Zhu?
I think several reasons lead to this sort of exchanges. Number one is that we are, of course, having the capability of making this sort of sophisticated warships. Second, I think China is facing multifaceted threats and challenges in security. It needs the protection of the Navy. And the third, China is becoming richer and richer, and China is developing very fast. Therefore, it should provide public goods to the world community as well as the regional members in this region. Therefore, Navy is the international service among all countries which have air Navy. So they can play very important role in this in performing these sort of missions. Therefore, these are the major reasons leading to the development of Chinese Navy vessels or warships.
And having said that, at the very start of this program, Professor Huang, you said China is a global power. Now, we've talked a lot about cooperation and providing public goods, but let's get back to basics. It's still the Navy. The basic mission of it is to protect national interest of the country. So talking about that, how significant is the strategic change in this arena?
No, I think, like I said, China is a global power. It's the #1 trading power. So therefore, China needs a peaceful, stable world, needs a peaceful, stable environment. Otherwise, how can a #1 trading power benefit from it? So global peace and global stability works for China's best interests. In order to do that, the Chinese Navy, as a blue water navy, does have a responsibility, like Professor Zhu Cheng, who just said, to maintain peace and stability together with other countries. In a sense, just like President Xi Jinping said quite a few times, that China needs a stable and prosperous world. And the world is good, and China is good. So therefore, if the world is peaceful, China is peaceful. So therefore, Chinese Navy, not only to defend China's own national security and territorial integrity, but also has this kind of responsibility to deliver public goods to maintain global peace and global stability. That does not mean China will perform like world policeman, and China never wants to do that. But China does have this kind of responsibility, working on the UN framework and to maintain peace. For example, Chinese Navy has been operating in Somali water for over 10 years, has played a very important role to keep that water from a troubled water into a golden water, like a golden navigation place.
We've been looking beyond, but now how about looking back at history and get some classics? Let me quote words from Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz. He said, "Every age has its own kind of war, its own limiting conditions, and its own peculiar preconceptions." Now, earlier, Professor Zhu, you mentioned that there are many determining factors to prompt this strategy change of the Chinese Navy? Let's talk about the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. How does that entail in this context?
I mean, I believe that the Navy has been grown from zero and from small to big and from very backward to quite advanced in technologies, and this is because China needs it, the region needs it, and the world needs it. And of course, during the process of development, it have got several turning points, because at the very beginning it has only a fleet of composed of the fish boats and fish ships. But nowadays it is developed into 5 arms or branches. And furthermore, the modernization of the hardware, I believe, started only after the Taiwan Strait crisis in 1996. Yeah, that's the most important turning point for the Chinese Navy. Without that, I don't think Chinese would have been able to see the importance of developing its Navy and other services. So this is the most important turning point. But nowadays, I think the Chinese Navy is developing itself into such a status which can cope with the security challenges and which can be used to fight the future wars, not the war in the past, not half or semi-mechanized wars, but maybe in the future AI-supported wars.
Right, Professor Huang, what's your take on this? What do you make of the role of the Chinese Navy in national rejuvenation? And let's be a little bit specific. What about unification?
I certainly know that China suffered a lot in the past 100 years, being invaded and humiliated, defeated again and again.
And most of those invasions are coming from the sea?
From the sea, yes. And frankly speaking, and in all those wars, Chinese Navy has never really won a battle fight before 1949. And China has very hard and sad and sometimes even humiliating experience in Navy. That's why when the Republic of China was established, Chairman Mao Zedong said we must establish a strong Navy. Now I think he can smile in his thumb because China does have a great Navy. But having said that, I think for China, China need a great and strong Navy to defend its national interests. But that does not mean China is going to use this powerful Navy to invade others, to force others to accept China's way of life. No, that's not what China is doing. China tries, like I said, first defend itself, second defend others. And also this is kind of deterrence power. With this strong Navy, whoever want to invade China or put war on China, we have to think twice. Now Chinese can not only fight on the land, in the air, but can fight on the water. And this is a very big deterrent. Sometimes we know peace needs to be maintained not just by goodwill, but by capability. That is, if you invade me, you do harm on me, I can let you pay for it. And this strong Navy is a guarantee for Chinese peace because, like I said, it serves as a very capable and very real deterrence forces for China.
Right. Now, for more international perspective, let's talk to Mr. Felgenhauer in Moscow again. Mr. Felgenhauer, what do you make of the strategy change of the Chinese Navy?
Again, it came out of mission. If you're sending your projecting force, if you're sending your ships out far away, if you're trying to have a blue water navy before you had a brown water navy, a coastal navy. A blue water navy requires, a brown water navy you can provide air cover from land bases. That's okay. If you have a blue water navy, you need aircraft carriers, or your ships out there projecting force will have no air cover guaranteed, and that's really will make them very vulnerable. So it's a kind of change of mission and change of strategy. And China has demonstrated it can build ocean-going destroyers, which are more like actually cruisers. It can build aircraft carriers, and this is our very expensive weapon systems. Naval weapon systems are one of the most expensive. But China is already very much a world economic power, almost on par with the United States. It has the technological capability and the financial capability and the need to maintain its economic model, to have a Navy, and a Navy that can project force into the outside world and maintain stability and security. And one comes from the other, and now we have a very different strategy, a very different China, and a very different Navy there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pavel Felgenhauer in Moscow. So, gentlemen, let me start with you again, Professor Huang. Do you think this is China flexing its military muscle?
No, I don't think so. China doesn't have to flexing its military muscle. China is a powerful country, that's a fact. I think this is China, number one, this kind of parade you see. To see, of course, first, China has a capability to defend itself. Number one. Number two, to deliver public goods, maintain global peace and stability. Also, it's a goodwill, because China invited over 13 countries, over 18 warships from other countries to join this celebration, which means China is willing and capable of working with others. It's not like showing muscles, like I want to invade you if you don't do it my way, I'm going to let you pay for it. No, I think that it's quite the other way around. Chinese Navy is first and foremost willing to work with anyone, just like Professor Chu said at the beginning of this project. China's notion is to have security together, called collective security system or concept, which means China will not and cannot and should not do it alone. China has to work with other countries together. So as a Navy, and it's not a means to invade others, it's a means to cooperation to collectively safeguard our security.
Now, what about transparency, Professor Chu?
I think display of this sort of advanced weapons and weapon systems is a token of transparency of China. Of course, in China, when it was weak, it would prefer to keep something secret, because that's a sort of deterrence. But nowadays, with the development of its hardwares, China is becoming more confident than it was. Therefore, you can see most of the advanced weapons and weapon systems are on display in this parade. So this is a sort of transparency. And furthermore, if you read the President Xi's speech, you can see China's intention, China's strategy are also very transparent to the outside.
And very quickly, Professor Huang, let's expand the scope to global governance. What role can a modernized and responsible Navy play in a better global governance system?
I think first and foremost, of course, is to defend the established rules, established international order, like multilateralism. And whoever we know that usually peace is damaged or peace is undermined by those who violate the rules everybody accepts. So as Chinese Navy, first and foremost, China will have to make sure that established rules and principles and norms will be followed. Of course, China will also do that in the first place. And second, of course, if a nation cannot even safeguard its own security, it cannot deliver any public goods. So Chinese Navy, first and foremost, can defend China's own security, and China can work for others. Last but not the least, of course, Chinese Navy will serve as a means to maintain the multilateral international system, and for example, a very concrete example, to defend the free trade system.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for input, Professor Huang Jing and Professor Zhu Chenghu there. That's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pan Dong in Beijing. Bye-bye.